All right, welcome to Mountain Real Estate. I am going to cover seasonality trends today. So we talked about this a little bit on other podcasts, but I've dove into the data and want to just kind of share how our market cycles work. So in Denver, which I've shared before, things are pretty consistent where there's a rise up in the peak spring in the spring season to a peak, and then things slow through the summer and then get very quiet in the winter. So it's kind of like one peak season that ramps up and ramps down. In Summit County, we have a couple different cycles, and I'll talk about why I think they happen and when they happen. So I'm going to try something crazy today and share my screen, which I do often in other areas of life, but not always on these podcasts. So in this screen, we're looking at kind of average monthly prices compared to the annual average. So we took data over the last 5 years from 2019 through 2024, and we looked at what is the average annual price each year, and then how does the January price compare to the annual price, and the February price compared to the annual, and the March, and so on. And then we look at that for 5 years in a row to kind of help define some of these peaks and valleys. And really, what we saw are 3 peaks and a couple valleys, 3 valleys. So we saw April and May, where prices are about 1 to 3% over average. August and September, where prices are 1 to 2% over average. And November and December, where prices are 4 to 5% over average, which actually surprised me. And then that left 3 valleys. So in February and March, prices are about 5% below average. In June, where prices are 5% below average. And then October, where prices are about 3% below average. And really, as we look at this, there's a couple different factors at play. So I'm going to go up to a different chart, which can be overwhelming, as my colleague Jennifer here showed me. But in general, what this looks at is those average lines. And so you can see 2019 is at the bottom here in orange. 2020 had a small increase over 2019, and then 2021 is where we saw the big COVID increase. In 2022, we saw another big COVID increase. 2023, we saw still an increase, but a relatively small one. And 2024, which is in green, we saw about a 7% increase on average as we look annually. And these are median sale prices in Summit County for residential. But what you can see with these little lines each year is that in Denver, these lines are all consistent. It goes up in the spring and then down in the summer and then down even further in the winter. But in Summit County, we see other factors that affect these. So we see sometimes our snowfall affects when people are coming to visit, or how many people can get into properties, or what they're looking for. We also see interest rates affecting these. So obviously during the COVID time, we saw a big drop when things shut down and a big increase. And then in the years following COVID, so in this purple line in 2023 and the green line in 2024, we see interest rates affecting when people are buying. So we see an increase in interest rates and a drop in demand, and then people kind of get used to it, and then we see a little bit more demand. But I think in general, what my takeaway was from this graph is that we have kind of some small peaks in late spring, early summer, and then we have kind of varying peaks in the fall, and then general peaks in the winter, whether it's in November or December, kind of varies. So those are this is what the data is showing. And now I'm going to talk about why I think this is happening. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I'm going to talk about like those as we normalize the graph to those kind of three peaks and 3 valleys. And even though they shift a little bit month to month and year to year, I'm going to talk about why I think those happen. So if we look at our peaks in that kind of April to May, late spring, early summer, when we look at the sales, we want to back into when they go under contract, because that's really when people are out looking. So in April and May, things went under contract, usually in March or April. And sometimes that's when people are out traveling for spring break, or they're trying to make moves before summer, before travel schedules get crazy. And honestly, that kind of surprised me. The April timeframe is really the ugliest time in Summit County. Sometimes we call it dog poop season, because all the snow melts and we find all the dog poop that's been covered up. But it's a time that the data shows, depending on the year, that we have some peaks. And then as we look at our August to September peak, that really means people went under contract in July or August. And that's the busiest time in Summit County. It's beautiful. Don't tell anybody, because it does get busy, but it's a lovely time. We have a lot of visitors. The weather's perfect. It's a great escape from the heat in other areas. And we have the lake and the trails and hiking and biking and all the activities that really make Summit County kind of magical. So that summer peak doesn't really surprise me. And then we have the November, December peak, which means that sales were happening in October and November. And that, in my mind, tells me that people are prepping for ski season, or finally deciding they want that condo before ski season or before the holidays. They really want that place in the mountains. So those are kind of our three peaks, and my guess at people's justification for those. As we jump into the slow times. So what's causing those dips when we really go below average? So we see that February, March dip means people went under contract in January or February. And this is really a slow time in real estate in Summit County, partially because a lot of our properties are rented. That's a good rental time where people make a lot of revenue during the holidays and then at that peak ski season. So listings during this time, if they are on the market, they're usually pretty motivated. So that might lead to lower prices. For the second valley, we have June, and those would typically go under contract in May. My guess is that's really when kids are still in school, and families are just kind of prepping for their summer trips. And so people are kind of staying home and not looking to purchase properties. So that May timeframe of going under contract, or the June sales, is really another valley. And the third is October. So October is typically slow. Again, that's mud season. Those people would be going under contract in September. It's usually when the snow starts to think about flying. And families are settling down. If families have kids, the kids are going back to school. So people are kind of hunkering down, not focused on purchasing properties. So those are kind of our three peaks in April, May, August, September, November, December, and our three valleys in February, March, June, and October. So even though we have multiple ups and downs, and those slide kind of year to year, depending on snow and interest rates and other economic factors, really the bottom line is buyers can find good deals in January, February, May, and September. And sellers that want to get the highest price for their property should look to have it on the market during those peaks in April, May, August, September, and November and December. So hopefully this helped kind of share the charts and the graphs with our seasonality and how it varies year by year. But despite the seasonality, we're still seeing our prices go up. So we saw, as we looked at this data from 2019 to 2020, we saw a pretty typical appreciation of about 7%. 2020 to 2021, we saw a 25% increase from COVID, which is to be expected. 21 to 22, we still saw an increase, a little bit less, but it was still a 13% appreciation, which is really good. From 22 to 23, we saw things slow down as interest rates picked up and that demand and back to work kind of started happening. We saw 3% appreciation, so a little bit lower than our average. And then surprisingly, in 2024, we saw our median price increase 7% again. So kind of back to that typical appreciation that we've seen over the last 20 years, between 23 and 24. So that's our seasonality and our trends over the last 5 years. Thanks for listening in.